In this video, we use modern tools and technology to create this amazing Barbarian two-handed sword. Stay tuned until the end of the video when we put it to the test.
For this project, we made a really large sword, something that we'd think a character like Conan the Barbarian would use.
We shall see.
Like the dwarf axe we previously made, the challenge was designing it so that it could be cut on a smaller laser and assembled into its full length later. I cut all the pieces from 1/8 inch MDF. If you hadn't heard me say this before, we like this material because of its cost, and it's easier to laser and just all around work with. I plan to paint the sword later, so MDF will make this a little easier too. All the pieces were masked with application tape to eliminate any edge burning. This mask is the same stuff we would use to mask vinyl decals. I increased the laser's power up to its highest setting and slowed its speed down to get a nice engraving depth in one pass. The engraving doesn't look great here, but that's why we use that mask. You'll see how much better it looks once it's removed later. All the pieces needed to have the mask peeled off. You can see that the engraved pieces look much better with the mask removed. I sanded the blade edges to give them a more rounded look. I thought this would give the finished sword a better overall appearance. All the pieces were glued together in layers. There were 3 major sub-assemblies to the sword: the blade, the middle guard thingy area, and the pommel. This allowed me to make the overall sword longer than what could be cut in the laser, but would let me glue something in each group and then move on to another sub-assembly while the previous sub-assembly dried. This video was put together to show each sub-assembly in its entirety. See and feel the edges of the stacked pieces, so I sanded them down. I wanted to get a smoother edge on these parts, so I applied a putty to help fill in any irregularities. I used an old tube of model putty, but I'd normally have used something like an automotive spot putty, but I couldn't find mine. I've really mostly used these putties for filling seams on plastic parts, but I think this will work on MDF. Sure, why not? I'm sure this will work okay. Once dry, I sanded the edges again until smooth. If there were any obvious low spots, I could have hit them with another coat of putty, but I think the result was good enough. I gave the same treatment to the pommel. First a quick sanding, filled with putty, and then sanded when dry. The last step to get ready for painting was sealing the wood surfaces with a sealer. Sealing the MDF makes a big difference in the finish by keeping the fibers from rising up when it's painted. I let the first coat dry for about an hour or so. Even the sealer does cause the MDF to get very slightly bumpy, but not nearly as bad as going straight to painting would have. A quick sanding with some very fine sandpaper took care of the very slight rough finish. I then gave everything the second coat of sealer. I painted the sword silver, but I started with a flat black base coat. I figured that would even out all the shades and give a good base for the silver paint. The ancient can of silver spray paint I use seems to be bottomless. It's the gift that keeps on giving for our projects, so I use this again for the entire sword. I just wanted to give the sword some light coats to get good coverage on the non-engraved surfaces. The engraving was painted by hand later. This paint came from Orchard Supply Hardware, or OSH, which closed here about 6 years ago, so the paint's at least that old. I was surprised it was still spraying good. And of course, partway through spraying, the nozzle gave me some trouble.
The hell with you!
But nothing a little cleaner and a brush couldn't fix. I went over the engraving with a thinned, dark silver to try to bring out the detail. I just washed this on and let it settle into the engraving, and then tried to wipe off the excess from the surface. Since the spray paints were enamels and this is acrylic, I didn't have to worry about the two types of paints interacting with each other. If I had tried using another enamel and started wiping like this, it would start to dissolve the base colors, making a really nasty mess. wasn't too thrilled with how the detail looked. It was better, but I still didn't think it was contrasty enough. I went over it again, but this time with a thinned down black paint. I was going to do this anyway to weather the surface. There's no technique here. I just splashed it on and wiped most of it off. It was finally time to put the 3 main sub-assemblies together. Huzzah! This was my favorite part, as the pieces fit together nice and puzzle-like. I don't know why, but this part seemed familiar, like I'd seen it before somewhere. I wrapped the handle in a fabric ribbon. We'll provide a link where we got it in the description below. I used a glue gun to speed things up a bit. I have a sort of love-hate relationship with glue guns, but they definitely speed this process up a lot. I still wasn't completely happy with the detail, so I tried dry brushing some gold-colored paint onto the raised surfaces to give it a little color. It's subtle, but I think it improved the overall look.
This is probably my favorite project yet. I love that it was something Dave designed quite a while ago, but he decided to improve upon it with some tweaks and artist Sam's addition of the awesome engraving art. Also, the level of detail brought about by simply adding several layers of paint and wash to the engraving really elevated the look of it. We've also had this sitting out in the lobby of our workshop for a couple of days, and everyone who's visited absolutely loves it. Thanks for watching. Let us know in the comments what you think, and if you've ever thought about doing a project like this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to get notified of future projects. We have more fantasy-related projects coming soon. Stay tuned.